Welcome back to the Voice of the Coast. I am your host, Danica. Along with me, we have Dr. Eric Melancon, St. Mary Coroner. Something that we don't talk enough about, I believe, and that is mental health. Um, Obviously, it is kind of one of those trending topics we talk about, but where's the solution for that? In St. Mary Parish, we know it's quite an issue. It's quite an issue with law enforcement as well. What's the role of the coroner when it comes to mental health?
Well, as a coroner, we deal a lot with mental health. I mean, we do coroner's emergency certificates, we do OPCs. A lot of that is because the access to mental health and throughout Louisiana, not just even in St. Mary Parish, is minimal. I mean, it's difficult, and to get people the proper care that they need, the resources are very limited. We've been kind of blessed with having the drug rehab facility over at the Old Fairview Center put on by Odyssey, and that's helped. And a lot of our mental health cases are people who've used a lot of drugs and have burnt themselves out. At least those are the ones who are the most active and harmful to themselves or others.
Right. But also when it comes to CECs and OPCs, this is where I guess someone like myself, you see or witness someone having maybe a manic episode and you don't want them to hurt themselves, you're
Sure.
able to contact the coroner's office or the hospital.
No, they contact the coroner's office because ideally for that process to be enacted, it has to be brought up, document filled out saying what you witnessed, and you technically have to witness it. And we put that down on paper, and we send law enforcement to go out and pick up the individual, not arrest them. It's just to pick them up and ensure safe transport to a facility where they can get a screening exam. A lot of times it's they may just be upset about something and saying things that they don't really mean, but we don't want to just minimize any of that because you never know when a threat is real.
Right, right. All right. Well, we also, this is one of those heavy topics that I'm like, well, what do we call this? Where are we in 2024 when it comes to COVID, coronavirus, SARS? Because I honestly thought coronavirus was COVID. I just thought it was a shortened name, even an acronym for that. But we're in 2024, 2019, 2020 is where we saw this big
Correct.
outbreak. Where are we now?
Well, the original COVID was the novel coronavirus of 2019. And coronavirus has been around well before 2019. We've had it back in the 40s and 50s, just like the influenza virus. The influenza virus changes. You have H1N1, you have bird flu, and all these other swine flu. Those are all different variations of the influenza virus. Coronavirus has been around a lot, just as long. It just has never gained notoriety until the 2019 virus occurred. I still am of the belief that that was a faux pas. It was a lab-created virus. For what purpose, I don't know, and it's not for me to speculate, but unfortunately it got out and caused some pretty severe havoc worldwide. Nowadays what we're seeing is coronavirus. The reason we know it's coronavirus, we actually test for it. It's kind of like the old head cold, corona being head, virus being illness, head cold, and the people are minimally sick for the most part. I mean, it's kind of flu-like, so for a few days they feel bad. The CDC's even gone and said there's no quarantine period for it. My suggestion as I see regular patients is to go ahead and stay home as long as you feel bad so you don't prevent spread, just like you would with the flu.
Are you saying also that masks are also here to stay?
I don't think we need a mask for
Okay.
anything. I think the masks were a good thing initially, but again, as a primary care physician, I hardly ever wear a mask or anything, and I get exposed to flu and all these other viruses all the time. I rarely ever get sick. In fact, it's been 5 years since we've had the initial COVID virus, almost 5 years, I should say. I've never had COVID. And again, Lord knows I've been exposed. And I think it's a blessing that I have that, again, I get inoculated as what the old herd immunity was. And they tried to say herd immunity was vaccination. It's not. It's low dose exposure over a long period of time. And so I probably have herd immunity. Teachers are notoriously good for herd immunity. The first few years that they're a teacher, they're sick all the time. And then eventually they never get sick. So you see teachers in the school system for 25, 30 years and man, that is
That's fine.
good
Ain't
as
no hope for
gold.
me. I needed to go home and take some vitamin E or some zinc.
C, zinc, all of it.
Right? Just always just so would you say just stay up on your vitamins or
Stay
try to
hydrated.
yeah.
Again, if you feel unwell, then certainly stay home. If you know other people who are sick, try and avoid them.
Yeah. Well, that's easy enough.
Simple.
All right. Well, we've got much more to cover, so come on back right here on the Voice of the Coast with yours truly. Welcome back to the Voice of the Coast. Again, I am your host, Danica, along with me, Dr. Eric Melancon, St. Mary Coroner, but also a physician. So a lot of these questions may kind of cross over
Sure.
into your other lane or field of study. And school is back. Today is the day, which is actually August 7th, Wednesday, so you may be watching this on repeat. But school is back, so that means, yes, while the kids are getting their education, they're also spreading germs.
Absolutely.
I also noticed during the summertime, strep was really big.
It did
Right?
seem to play a strong role, and not just in kids. I had a lot of adults with strep type symptoms, which that's a little unusual. Most adults don't manifest strep too often, but yeah, I probably saw an inordinately higher percentage this summer.
Now I'm gonna go back to COVID, and of course I don't want you to delve into any type
Coronavirus.
of coronavirus. But I am gonna talk about COVID in a way, only
Okay.
because not here to do, we're not gonna do a whole conspiracy theory type of show, but history shows every couple of years there comes out some new illness. I mean, we went through swine flu. You mentioned SARS. We went through, I don't know, we start naming all kinds of other things. Do you foresee that, we might be seeing another
Sure.
COVID?
What's election year? You always see things
Uh-oh.
around election time.
Uh-oh.
Things
that a
that you don't know.
conspiracy?
That's a conspiracy theorist. Come
Okay.
on, we got to stick with the
Okay.
thing. No, and it tends to cycle. I don't know if it just so happens to fall in line with election season. Who knows? I mean, from my standpoint, we take it as it comes and kind of roll with it as it goes.
How do you stay prepared as a physician, as a doctor, as a physician?
Well, you got to keep up. You got to know what's going around. You talk to other physicians. Region 3, usually, most of our stuff comes from the Department of Health and the CDC, but, Region 3 could use some tools to help put out there what we have. I know when we got notified of the TB scare in the Franklin area, they were calling me regularly. Well, that kind of went away. I guess they didn't find very many. It was more of an isolated incidents,
Okay.
which is good. That's what we want. We don't want any problems with things like TB because that's more of a severe disease.
Okay. What does that include? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of curious. I've heard
TB can last in you for all your life, and it causes damage to the lungs. It can infect other organs and things like that, and it is fairly contagious. So, the treatment is not a benign treatment, and it up to 6 months of treatment or longer in some cases, depending on the person. And the drugs that they use are fairly strong and toxic. So if you have a positive TB skin test, the recommended treatment's about 6 months, which, those medicines can interfere in your liver and cause some other issues. So you got to be real careful. So protecting yourself from people who potentially are at risk, then certainly stay away. But the Department of Health is pretty tough on that stuff.
Now I'm going to bring up a topic that may or may not, you have as much knowledge as a coroner, but you mentioned the LDH, and I'm chomping at the bit to get that interview with Dr. Eric Brooks about STDs.
Yeah.
Can you speak on, what's going on in Louisiana, St. Mary Parish? Because I have seen interviews and I've seen videos of it is on the rise, particularly in places like Houston, Texas.
Well, Louisiana has always been notorious for high rates of STDs. I don't know what the exact numbers are here in St. Mary Parish because that's not something we kind of deal with in the coroner's office. I know in my practice I've seen, I see cases every year. Most of it has been more the simple treat things, not the big HIVs or hepatitises and things like that. But Dr. Brooks may be able to give you a little bit more light on that. I do think, protection and things like that would help. I know in 2020 when everything was shut down, we had more babies, we had more STDs.
Yeah.
Of course, there wasn't much else to do. So, things being common, go with it.
Yeah, that we're gonna move on that one.
There you go.
Right. Something else that I know you were quite an advocate. You were very vocal on, and that is the coroner's operational budget. That was we were at those parish council meetings where you were again vocal about what's happened to our budget. What are we going to do? But we're going to have you hold it because we got to take a commercial break, and we'll talk about it when we get back. So stay with
Perfect.
us. Welcome back. Time to continue this whole conversation about the Coroner's Operational Fund. This is something where you were quite the advocate, very vocal at the parish council meetings. We were there in attendance. Tell us a little bit, kind of the backstory. Was it taken away? Did you not know it was there?
Well, first I didn't know it was there. Judge DeMahe had called me back in the beginning of 2022 requesting that we move our coroner's operational fund charge from $5 a ticket to $10 a ticket. And that was so that we would keep in line with Iberia and St. Martin Parish, because the three parishes comprise the 16th JDC.
What does a ticket mean? What do you mean?
Like if you get a speeding ticket,
Okay.
included in those court costs are
Gotcha.
a fee for the coroner's office.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's done throughout almost every state, every parish in the state. And we were charging less. So of course she asked me, and I'm like, I'm perfectly fine with that. It made things easier on the bookkeeping end for them. Come to find out, she had to call me back and say we couldn't even do that because we didn't really have the right to charge the $5. So I presented that to the parish council back in 2022, and nothing happened after that. So when it didn't come back up and it wasn't done, I was a little upset and went ahead and met with Senator Alain, and Senator Alain Robert. He said, I'll be glad to take care of that for you. So I wrote the ordinance and sent it to him, and he tried to get it started on the Senate side, but that was one of the things that had to start on the Congress side. So anyway, Representative Sablon certainly took care of it and got it passed on their side unanimously. So the coroner's operational fund will be back in existence. I'm not sure exactly when we can restart it, but I'm going to rewrite our ordinance to where that money actually comes as the coroner's discretional fund. It's not going to be used as just part of the general fund. That way we can do things like uniforms. We still don't have uniforms, education, in certain needs. I'd also like to do some, educational thing for the parish, like what you said, the STD thing, or the coronavirus stuff, or TB stuff, whatever. I want to have resources where we're not just a entity that just records death. We want to make sure that we provide a service that's going to be beneficial to the people who are alive.
Right. You mentioned about using those funds for uniforms. What about training? And I know that you guys have a new transportation, new vehicle. How's that going?
The vehicle's over a year old now.
Yeah.
But no, the vehicle works great. In fact, we could use a second one. Absolutely, it would because both investigators work all the time, and there's times we have one out of parish bringing bodies for autopsy and stuff. Unfortunately, there is no money in the budget. The previous administration left us with a $2.5 million shortfall. So we're having to make cuts instead of improvements. Fortunately, I was able to negotiate with Parish Forensics, who is our autopsy people, that they actually will come and pick up the bodies. And instead of charging us, they said, oh, we'll include it in the price. I'm thinking, man, that's a better deal. I didn't even have to fight too hard for that one. So I think they understand the economics of it and how costly it is for us to get transport, because transports are $300 to $400 a piece now.
Right.
So if I had to send, and I was not willing to take our only unit out of the parish to go deliver a decedent for autopsy.
Now, how do you and the funeral homes work together? Are y'all,
Well, if it's not a coroner's case, we release the bodies to the funeral homes. Funeral homes can pick them up.
Gotcha.
And that's fantastic. But if you do things by the book, if you send somebody for an autopsy, there's a concern or a question. So the chain of custody has to be maintained. In the past, they used to use the funeral homes to go and bring them for autopsy. Of course, there's your $300 or $400 charge. The problem with that is if it were a homicide case or something that required, you know, law enforcement, the chain of custody was broken. So that could be a loophole to get somebody out of something that they may have done.
Okay. There's one more question regarding something that you were, very vocal about as well, and that's investigative pay, equal pay. But we'll take a short moment, a break, and we'll definitely jump right on that when we get back. Welcome back to the Voice of the Coast. Let's get right back into it. Heat. I know, obviously, we're talking about deaths, but have there been many heat-related deaths? What's your advisory? Because it is hot out there.
Well, every year it seems like we're getting hot temperatures. Of course, is this global warming? I don't know. I just find it hard to believe we can blame it on a global warming when the record was set in 1921.
Which was?
101 degrees.
Oh, okay.
So the heat record was in 1921, but we're talking about global warming causing this heat.
Oh.
We've had heat. Regardless, the big issue, we're not as accustomed to heat like we were back in the 1920s.
Okay.
1920s, we were used to living without air conditioning and things like that. We dressed differently. So who are more vulnerable to the heat? People who work outside, our elderly especially. I know Miss Beverly Domain works diligently to identify those people at high risk and make sure they have the things they need, checking on their air conditioners, making sure they have fans. But you may have loved ones who are older and may live alone. Check on them. Talk to them every day and make sure that they're getting adequately hydrated. Seniors don't hydrate themselves. People who work outside, cutting your grass. Even me, I cut my own grass. Somebody said, why you don't do it? I love cutting grass. But, I've gotten to where I get fairly weak after cutting grass for a prolonged period of time. So I've forced myself, even though I may not be thirsty, to drink. And the sad thing is when you get overheated, sometimes you don't feel like drinking. You have to.
Yes.
You have to.
Yeah. But like you said, fortunately, we haven't had any cases.
Haven't had any heat-related deaths.
Okay. Let's talk about sexual assault cases and those investigations. I always go back to this because I remember this was a part of your campaign wanting to have a SANE nurse, and that is a sexual assault nurse examiner, right? Do we have one?
We do. We have a SANE nurse. We have some in the development. But the whole sexual assault thing is an issue for me because it says by law that we're responsible for it. It doesn't quite work that way. I talked with Senator Ale about it for a little while. I've not talked with Representative LeBlanc, but there's no clarity at the state level as far as what our real role is. They seem to think that it was more just to provide the sexual assault nurse. If that's the case, that's fine, but don't tell me I'm responsible for something, because if you tell me I'm responsible, I'm going to be responsible. The bad thing is I have no way to force anyone to report, and I don't know.
Right, and I'm gonna tell you, I just be perfectly honest. I would never know. I would have never thought that the coroner's office handles those type of cases.
Well, it's only because most of the coroners are physicians, and they wanted to make sure they had a sexual assault person to do the sexual assault kit. Of course, that has now trickled down to the SANE nurses, which again means our involvement. Most of the time, I don't even know about them until I get a bill from the sexual assault nurse for the exam.
But shouldn't there be some type of statistics, some data? Because I will tell you, as somebody who deals with law enforcement, and you see all the different, cases, the investigations that involve sexual assault. What happens to those victims?
I have no idea because, again, the statistics are not tallied by me because I don't get any of the information. And there's no legal recourse for me to say, hey, you're not doing your job, I'm going to go arrest you. No, that's not the case. It's part of the thing that I'm working on, and I think some new legislation needs to come through it. I've spoken with the coroner's office attorney and also the Louisiana coroner's office attorney, and it's something we're going to hopefully present in September when we have our semi-annual meeting. You know, the use of data and statistics is a resource that I think we can provide, and I think we need to make some other changes. You know, we usually don't get cases that are non-coroners cases reported to our office. I think we ought to tally every death in St. Mary Parish. Doesn't matter what cause. I mean, you know, if I had a heart attack today and I die 3 days later in the hospital, that's not a coroner's case. But that information would be good to put into our data bank to say, this is what people are dying of in St. Mary Parish. That way we can then ask for more resources to provide education or
I didn't think I thought you had that information. You
not
don't?
always.
Wow.
Only
Okay.
if it's within 24 hours of admission, or it's a death that died at home. But people who are chronically ill, you know, your hospice cases are reported. That's nice, but those, you know.
All right. Well, that was interesting. I didn't know that. Well, thank you, Doc. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys next time.